Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. The first item on the work session is the indoor sports complex proposals. Rodney?
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Conley from Victus, and we came to report back to you on the proposals that we received and have a discussion about where we want to go from here. So just to catch everybody up, last summer we started this process, and Brian put together a study that basically surveyed the community. We had a lot of interaction with the public. We interviewed a lot of people, and the consensus was clearly that an indoor sports facility is desired in this community, that the current facilities can't keep up with the demand. Certainly there's no room for growth in indoor sports because there's no facilities to accommodate it. And there was just a lot of public support for this kind of facility. So with that in mind, we moved ahead and we advertised an RFP that would solicit any developers out in the United States, basically, that would be interested in giving us proposals. And the way we set the proposal up was we offered several different city-owned properties, and we basically said, here's the property, take the property, and if you, tell us what you can do with that property, build the facility, operate the facility. So that's how the RFQ was set up. So with that, we got two proposals in, and I'll turn it over to Brian to go over it with you.
So, as Rodney mentioned, in November of 2018, the city received two responses to that RFQ. One was from a for-profit operator out of Virginia called Eastern Sports Management, or ESM, and the other was from the local Hagerstown Ice Amateur Athletic Association that currently operates the ice and sports complex. And then both groups were invited in for interviews, and city staff, as well as myself, conducted those interviews in January of this year. So just to give you a quick overview of, and all of this evaluation process was, this is not just Victus advisors, this is discussions with city staff and kind of a joint assessment of the pros and cons of each proposal. So as far as ESM, the pros of their proposal were they're a highly qualified and experienced project team, including sports facility operations. They had a private development partner as well. They had construction partners set up, design, engineering, as a turnkey team. The proposal and the site concepts that they drew up were very well developed and professionally prepared. They proposed to operate the facility, just the operations, without the need for public operating subsidies. So they said that they could operate it at a net positive income. And then they also included ancillary development proposal at the golf course, which could be a positive given that the city currently spends, I think, $200,000 a year operating the golf course on that site. In terms of cons of their proposal, number one was simply price. They presented two options. One included a pool aquatic facility that wasn't requested in the RFQ, but they provided that as an option. That was a $54 million proposal. And then they had an option without a pool that was about a $36 million proposal. So the price tags on both were quite high. And on top of that, the proposal did not include any private investment. So they were saying, here's two proposals of what we'd like to operate. If you build those, or we build them and you pay the debt service on them, then we would be happy to operate those facilities in your market. Hagerstown Ice Amateur Athletic Association, some of the positives from their proposal, they have an existing relationship with the city and they're experienced operating an existing sports facility in Hagerstown. They propose to expand next to their existing complex at Fairgrounds Park, which in terms of the fact that Fairgrounds Park already hosts quite a few sports uses, it could continue to position the complex as a destination sports attraction. And then their estimated project cost was significantly lower than the ESM proposal. And it also included 50% of the construction costs to be sourced from private fundraising efforts. So they proposed essentially a 50-50 split between what their fundraising target would be and then what the city would have to provide to construct the expansion. In terms of cons, the proposal was significantly less detailed than the ESM proposal in terms of providing details and partners throughout every step of the process. They had a project cost for the expansion that was estimated at 16 to 18 million. But when we looked closer, that was just a hard construction cost estimate. So it didn't include site costs or soft costs or things like that that could add significant cost in addition to that estimate. As I mentioned, the proposal didn't have as much detail, so their project team was loosely defined. There was no construction partner identified or engineering partner identified. And there were no full-time members of the board or staff of HIAAA identified as being dedicated to the project. Because they had a significant fundraising component, private fundraising component built into their proposal, as a result, their development timeline was much longer. Obviously, there's trade-offs between needing time to fundraise versus, if the city went ahead and paid for the project in terms of timing. And then lastly, if you use their 16 to 18 million number, which again is just hard costs, even at that price, if you're looking at a 50% fundraising target, you're looking at 8 to 9 million, which is a very significant amount of money to be raised in this community. And HIAAA, acknowledged to us that they don't have experience raising that amount of money in this marketplace. So, it seemed more like we'll give this a shot, and try to raise that from private funds. But ultimately, if that fell short, it would be on the public sector to fill that gap. So in terms of key takeaways that we developed in conjunction with city staff, in terms of ESM's proposal, although they're a very highly qualified sports operator, the construction costs in both options is far too expensive, especially because the city would be responsible for 100% of that debt service. In terms of the HIAAA proposal, we felt that their funding, and fundraising plan was a little vague. They don't have a full-time professional staff that could lead the fundraising and design and build process. And questions remain about their ability to operate a much larger facility without needing some city subsidies. And the business plan wasn't really built out in that level of detail. So I'm going to turn it over to
So I talked to
Rodney.
both ESM and HIAAA, and of course Paul and Peter both here this evening. But I would just say that ESM, I talked to John Wack, who's their president, and he is more than willing to come in and speak to the group to talk about other opportunities. I think in the final analysis, they just shot way higher than what we were thinking. Yeah. We were thinking that a facility of this nature would be significantly less than what they're proposing, and I think there is a realistic opportunity to do something at a much lower cost, but you're still talking $15-20 million.
In terms of youth and amateur sports complexes like this, those price ranges, that sort of 35 to 55 million, is considered sort of the Cadillac option. So there are certainly options for indoor sports facilities that would accomplish the city's goals and be probably more in the 15 to 20 million dollar range, but that's not what they proposed, unfortunately.
And with HIAAA, speaking with Paul yesterday and with Pete, our facility at the ice rink is maxed out. They literally have people fighting over ice time because it's in demand so much. So a second rink is definitely something that should be considered. And at some point, I would suggest that we bring them in and let them give us a proposal for something of that magnitude.
To clarify, their proposal that had that 16 to 18 million dollar number was for adding a second sheet of ice and then constructing a second level on top of that would have multi-use space for putting down artificial turf or putting down courts. So that was essentially taking a second sheet of ice expansion plan and adding even more cost to it to try to sort of shoehorn in that concept of a multi-use sports complex. So what Rodney's saying is if you step back when looking at their proposal, ultimately, they're currently an ice facility that has demand for a second sheet of ice. So maybe there's a more affordable option that ultimately private fundraising could take a significant chunk out of that cost, that steps back and just meets that immediate demand for a second sheet of ice.
So the three questions that we offered to you, just to kind of help us discuss where to go from here. The first is, do we want to continue to pursue this and to look for other funding partners, such as the county, such as other state or nonprofit groups, on a more scaled-down proposal and start more with gaining partners before we go too much further? The second question is tied to that, a more scaled-down facility that is more affordable. Is this something we want to pursue? And then obviously we would work later on with a third-party operator.
And what I can say there is, you know, we talked to, when the RFQ was issued, we talked to probably 5 or 6 other, in addition to ESM, other private sports facility operators. And the first question for me was, how much money does the city have to put into the building? And I said, well, they're ideally looking for a proposal where a private partner comes in and builds it all themselves. And they said, oh, well, if the city wants to build it, give me a call. And they didn't even submit a response. And that's the model that most of them are operating on, because they can find cities or counties or joint city-county partnerships where the public sector will build the facility and then contract with a third-party operator to manage it. So that's the model that they're all pursuing. And so most of them said, well, if that's what they're looking for, we're not even going to bother responding. Whereas ESM at least said, okay, we'll respond and we'll just put in a proposal that says, yeah, we'd love to operate a facility there, but we're going to ask you to pay for it.
Ronnie, do you recall what and I know this is probably asking a lot, what the initial estimate was for building that addition at the grandstands years ago?
It was like 8 million.
But that was 2000.
Yeah, that's 4 or 5. It's been probably at least 10 years ago, Mayor. Yeah, but if I recall, it was like 6 or 8 million.
So probably double that now safely.
Mm-hmm.
And that wouldn't really provide a turf court. That was,
Was this hard floor?
yeah, 2 or 3 basketball or sports courts. Yeah.
So it sounds like we had some proposals that were things over and above the scope that we were thinking, like the pool. How do we go back and define specifically what do we want this facility to look like? How many basketball courts, how many soccer fields? What exactly do we want? And then, I mean, we know what pieces of ground we have available. And then get some cost information on that, and then go approach the county and see what we can get as as support from the county and the state too. I think if we narrow the scope, if we really narrow the scope down on what size building we need.
And I think we did in the initial study. I think ESM is pursuing a number of projects, many in Virginia, some that we've been involved in, where what they proposed here is similar to what they're either going to be operating soon once it's built, or they were, pitching cities and counties of Virginia to build. And so I think to some extent they said, well, this works in Virginia, let's try to apply that here, rather than sticking to what we laid out in the RFQ and was also defined in the study. And I think they just misjudged that situation. So I think there is a model laid out from our study that we could start putting some concepts and harder cost estimates to on various sites in the city if you wanted to go that route.
And I know there is a need for a second sheet of ice at the ice complex. That's something that I think, I don't know if we can bundle that into this, or if it should be a separate discussion, separate type of funding, or what.
I think we should hear out what the ice rink has in mind. Let them present to us, and but I think at a minimum it would include a second sheet of ice.
Yeah.
To go from $36 million without a pool to what you suggest is 15 to 20 million, that's a big difference. So when they were submitting these proposals, I mean, is this based on what they see in Virginia, I
Yes,
suppose?
that's
So when
my
you say
opinion.
15 to 20 million, is that going to be like, oh, heck no, I would never, that seems like a mediocre type of facility, or?
I can show you examples of currently operating buildings that are in the 80 to 120,000 square foot range. Many of them are either tilt-up concrete, free-span buildings, or more of like warehouse-style metal-sided buildings with, you know, a nice lobby built on front of them. What ESM proposed was probably a higher level of finish that was necessary. They had a significant health and wellness component built into there, even without the pool add-on. They had fitness centers, they had, you know, juice bars, things
Oh
like
my.
that built in there that in terms of accomplishing the basic goals of what's needed, which is space to play, it went above and beyond that. So if you're talking about fulfilling the basic need for more indoor artificial turf and, you know, 4 to 6 basketball, volleyball courts, all you need is a minimum amount of climate-controlled indoor space that's free span and has high enough ceilings to be able to.
120,000 square foot Quonset hut, basically.
Probably, yeah, I mean, probably more of a 80,000.
Airplane hangar.
Yeah, exactly, and
Well,
many,
Austin can do that, that's fine.
and many of the facilities that are very successful now that were built within the last 5 to 7 years across the country are that style of building. You know, it doesn't need to be the health and wellness spa-like building in order to more than meet the needs of the community that would use it.
I mean, I could see something like that on the municipal stadium lot, and then allow private entities to come in and put in a juice bar, or juice, I mean, that's how you would spur that small business activity.
That's common, yeah.
Well, and I guess the question is the city willing to, I mean, it sounds like you didn't even get enough proposals because, you know, we didn't say
They
or
wanna
aren't
see
willing
public-
to contribute, right,
They want to see
exactly.
public money
So,
contributed to capital costs.
I mean, I think it's only fair that, you know, there's a discussion to say like, well, it's either zero or here's how much we're willing to contribute. You know what I mean?
I think
It's-
we also need to reach out to the county and the state
Absolutely.
and see.
What
There's-
they're interested
And
in.
they do
Yeah.
have money in one of their CIPs. It's probably not enough to build the whole thing, but maybe that would be a joint session type of discussion. or-
Yeah,
It appears that it could be roughly half of what we're talking about, so.
I think that if you do that, you have to acknowledge that, that your effort is then expanded into where, you know, that's going to be. I mean, I just feel like you come in with sort of a simple idea, and I realize, you know, that's how it works here, and it's sort of way out here, you know, far left or far right from where it originally began. I mean, talking about you know, to get something in that's a $36 million proposal that converts the golf course and adds in private development, I mean, it's just, you know, and then adding now in different partners, it seems like it's gone far away from this initial concept of, you know, the installation of an indoor turf facility that everybody in this community, you know, far outside of the city, recognizes there's a need for, but, you know, can't be accomplished in just that simplicity. And so, yeah, I mean, we go to the state, we go to the county, but, you know, I think that we need to be prepared for the response that, yeah, I mean, if we're going to be significant funding partners, we're going to have significant influence over where that occurs. And for me, just sitting here at this table representing, you know, this populace of people is, you know, there are 3 locations from the outset for me, 2. I know you've added the golf course, but there are 2 from the outset for me that have provided, in my mind, some city-oriented direct return on investment benefit. And that's the proposal that came from the Ice Spring folks, which I still think is more viable than the other one we got. And the stadium, which when I asked the SEM why they didn't even consider the stadium, you know, they were very frank. They said, you know, we didn't want to enter that political foray of, you know, that current amenity being there. And I get that. which I found odd, that I think they just, politically hedged the bet that we were gonna more easily be able to politically give up the golf course than we were the stadium. And I said, I don't know that that's a safe bet to make in this community, and so I just keep going back, as the mayor just alluded, you put this 60,000, 80,000 square foot building down in this space, provide indoor turf space that accommodates that current community need and brings people in to the city to use it. You don't get that same return on that city investment if the county says, we'd really like that over at the Review Herald property, or out along 81, or at the edge of Dual Highway. You just don't get it. And so I'm open to however folks want to take this from here. But if it means me politically having to say, sure, I'll go back on that position and say, yeah, I recognize now, city's gonna have to put some skin in the constructive game for that, I'm okay with that. But if that means that it's somewhere, outside of those areas that provide that direct urban core benefit, you might as well let somebody else, go and do it.
Where are we getting the money from?
Well, that's,
But that's what I'm saying.
Well, the answer though is, I agree totally with Kristen. Because if you're gonna bring the county in to do this, then A, you open up, you have to, you can't tell the county, we want you to be a substantial funder of this, and then tell them, but these are your only choices of location, all right? So let's assume for a second that a great location is Review and Herald. Folks, I've seen enough double taxations in my life that I don't need any more. If the county is going to put it in the county, don't come to me and ask for money from the city. Everybody who's paying taxes in the city is a county taxpayer. So if it's going to go in the county, I don't want to fund it with city money at all.
Absolutely not.
Because we're already funding it with our taxpayer money. And, I wasn't quite candidly in favor of going to this next step because it seemed apparent to me after our last hearing that the concept that I always understood was this is such a great deal and that all these people were doing it, that, it's a moneymaker. And what it is a money sucker. I mean, yeah. And so let's assume for a second that we had $10 million. Is this where we would put it? When we talk about economic incentives when we talk about neighborhood rehabilitation, when we talk about, having these funds that we're all trying to figure out where to get, that we would rather put 7 figures into something like this so somebody can come in and operate it. And I do agree with Christian. I'm very open to wanting to hear from the ice rink people. I know they've been put off, but so far they're the only ones who have shown that they can operate a facility that other people couldn't operate. But I think inviting the county in just invites us into funding for a county project. And I just don't see where we have money to do it, period. I was always under the impression that our skin in the game would be the property. That would be our skin in the game. We got the property, we can give you the property, whether it's municipal stadium or wherever it is. But clearly, that's like urinating in the ocean from what people are looking for.
It's not enough now.
Right.
There was a time maybe it was.
Right.
But it's not enough.
And it also sounds like there's no way that we would come in under 7 figures for what people say they need. And I don't see anywhere where we come up with 7 figures.
I agree, I have no interest in building a stadium in the county if we partner with them, but I don't know why we couldn't go to the county and say, we want to do this, but it has to be in city limits. City limits is in the county. They're going to profit off of it as well.
I mean, I
Even
think
if
it's
in city limits.
Pardon. I just think that it's always worth a conversation. I think that it's only fair to.
If we
I mean,
start-
We ought to have
I mean,
this as
like, we've
part of
already
our joint,
started.
To your point.
have this as
though,
part of our joint conversation with the county and
Exactly.
2 by 2.
Our
Right.
position to the county would be that the city's donating the land, not fiscal or not capital to build this because we're already paying county taxes.
The success of the city is also the success of the county, and I think too often we get,
The hotel motel I mean, all of the things that are going to be, the people are gonna come out from out of town.
That we don't get.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I know we don't get it, but
It
it's
goes to the
still, it
county.
goes to the county.
There's a
So-
benefit that you can show the county. We haven't run the economic impact analysis yet. It was in, I think, our original phase 2, but, that's something we could say, draw up and show, here's the benefit you would get as the
Right.
county from hotel stays.
And restaurants and, mall visits and all the
Yeah,
things that
exactly.
go into. I mean, I'm in favor of at least having the discussion, and if it's worth the discussion to me. And if they say no, then they say no, and we tried, and
With the caveat that it's in the city somewhere.
exactly.
Well, and I think it's foolish, this question number 3, I mean, to look at the ice rink and say, yeah, let's have a separate conversation where you're just gonna build a sheet of ice there. Recognizing that you have that destination and all of that parking and all of the geographic topography that meets, at that area for a lower level rink and an upper level, indoor facility to not, I don't know, it's just odd to me that you would say, okay, let's just go over there and build an ice rink, but let's keep talking about this other idea where we're gonna have to do all of that stuff, that ancillary stuff, completely over again somewhere else. I don't understand.
I'm assuming that question 3 is an alternative to not doing this project at all. That's my assumption, that we determine that it's not affordable, and then if that's the case, do we look at a second?
I'm
sheet?
sure they probably.
Then you're gonna
already have
determine that a
numbers
second
on
sheet of ice
second
isn't-
sheet of
I don't know.
You know what I'm
mean,
saying?
I don't know.
If they're gonna come in and say, hey, we need $8 million for a second sheet of ice, we're gonna have to do this other thing.
I don't know. I don't
They'd
know what
probably
they
say,
would
well,
need.
we're not gonna do that,
Yeah, I mean,
that
I have
either.
no idea what they would need for the second sheet. But I don't think one has to
so
do
it
with
sounds
the other,
like we need
that's
to
all.
get the ice rink on the agenda.
Yes.
Mhm.
I don't think so.
I don't think this evening's the time, we'll have you guys in, okay? I think that's the best way to dedicate time to you, so. I mean, in a perfect world, we would build a metal building on the current soccer fields at Fairgrounds Park, tear down Municipal Stadium and put open soccer fields there and kill 2 birds with 1 stone and use up all of our property that we have there.
Well, you wouldn't have to put open soccer fields there, because if you did do what you're talking about at fairgrounds, that'd be used year-round.
Yeah, but you're taking away, yeah. but
You wouldn't
I
be
think
taking
you
away
still
their-
need the open soccer fields too.
I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, because you're gonna have to have that inclement weather type even in the,
Got you.
but anyway, I mean, the point is, it creates more soccer fields.
Mm-hmm.
It does both, and you still get the hotel nights and you still get all that because you can still have the tournaments that you wanna have and all those kind of things. And you use up 2 pieces of property that, I mean, could be revenue generators now as opposed to non-revenue generators. But let's make sure that we get the ice rink in on a work session. At least, I'm sure they probably have some numbers about a second sheet of ice already put together. And have a conversation about that, and we'll have a discussion with the county at our joint meeting.
All right, I'll start talking to them at staff level, and see what we can come up with.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Got that? Okay. Michelle, you're up. I've been waiting on this all day. Now I had 4 cups of coffee.
Very good. So good afternoon, everyone. And before Jennifer and I get started, I just want, before we walk through any numbers, and again, we're here just to give a snapshot of where we are in our process. But the budget process itself actually starts in the month of November. My group, along with Human Resources, starts looking at manpower and staffing and where we are. We build the payroll budget based on known factors like existing union contracts. The month of December, from the 1st of December to the end of December, the departments all have an opportunity to give us and build and prepare their wish list, if you were. First, for their capital projects for a 5-year period, and also for their operating budget request for the next fiscal year. The month of January, Jennifer and I spent the first 3 weeks solid and nothing but meetings with every single department. First, we reviewed their capital requests, and then we reviewed their operating. Mike actually joined us for the last little marathon, several days that we had, and it's quite a long process for that 3-week period. That brings us to the end of January. So at the end of January, we sat back, we took a snapshot, and the snapshot as of Friday the 25th is a $3.4 million deficit in the general fund. Again, that is with everything that's keyed in and under the initial requests. So the month, actually last week, as well as this week, the process we work with, and we'll get with Mr. Spiker, is working on balancing this current deficit. So again, last week we're at 3.4 million. Last year, I think when we sat here, we started at 2.7 million, so we're starting a little bit more of a deficit than what we were at this point last year. We currently are at about $2.3 million still to go. And when we come back March 31st, you will have a budget book document and the general fund will be balanced. So everything that is in this packet is informational, just to kind of give you an overview of where we are, what is included, what is not included. The first, actually on the second page, is a little chart that just shows you revenue and expenses, and it looks at anything that is an increase from fiscal year 20 budget to fiscal year 19 budget. And right now, fiscal year 20 budget in the general fund was $45.1 million in revenue. Last year, the approved budget, actually the current fiscal year budget, is 46.4. That's a $1.3 million difference. And I know that sounds significant, but really it breaks down to 2 big items that are at the very bottom of that page. And it is equivalent to about $1.2 million in one-time items. So in fiscal year 19, we had a one-time transfer from the health insurance because we had a surplus. And according to our fund balance policy for the health insurance, we were able to put that back to the general fund and the utility fund. And that was a little bit over $500,000. And then also in fiscal year 19, we have about $635,000 in planned fund balance use. As of right now, the snapshot, there is no fund balance use being utilized, but I will say at this point, sitting here, realistically, if in a week we've got and have found $1 million, really and truly, I'm not going to be able to keep capital infrastructure requests in without utilizing fund balance reserves, which we had in fiscal year 18. So my plan is that when we come back March 31st is to include CIP projects, and I will be utilizing fund balance. Not all of it. Again, we'll be looking at all the items. We'll identify any other funding sources that we can, and that's something that we've actually worked through and has helped us so far this week. On the expense side of the equation, the bottom half of the chart, $48.5 million right now in expenses based on the initial blush and request compared to $46.4 million. So that's a $2 million increase over prior fiscal year. The biggest items there are in transfers to other funds. And just as a reminder, the transfers to other funds in fiscal year 20, and actually I'll backtrack. So last May, we approved the fiscal year 19 budget with a tax rate increase. And we did that with a 6 cent on most all real estate properties and 9 cents on apartments. And when we did the 9 cents on the apartment buildings, it was so that that additional revenue, which was about $800,000, would go towards economic incentives. So right now in the fiscal year initial requests for fiscal year 20, I have about $1.2 million going to economic redevelopment, $1 million for Invest Hagerstown incentives, $175,000 for all the other activities that occur under economic redevelopment, and of course the largest being our PEP program. The other large dollar increase here is when the very initial requests were done, all of the capital projects are put in, and it looked like there was a $1.9 million need in the general fund to actually move forward with all the requests that were put in. So that really and truly is what's driving the expenses in fiscal year 20 to be over, significantly over fiscal year 19. General fund revenue, take a step back, just mention two bigger things. One is in the categories of fines and forfeit, no, let's not start with fines and forfeitures. I'm gonna backtrack. In licensing and permits, typically we would have $360,000 to $400,000. That's not quite 2 cents on the property tax, but that revenue comes in the form of a cable franchise revenue. And right now, there is pending an unknown impact legislation from FCC rulings that may take all that revenue away. So with this initial request, I do not have any monies in there for cable franchise revenue to continue, and that is about $360,000. The other thing to mention on the fines and forfeitures, two large programs that drive that primarily are our Safe Speed for school programs, our speed cameras, and we have been seeing a reduction in the amount of the citations being issued, which is a positive thing because that was one of the goals when this was initially set up. But again, we're looking at a decrease in fiscal year 20 budget over fiscal year 19 budget based on what we're seeing actually occur right now. At the same time, our Red Light program, we were really hopeful that that program would take off a little bit better, that we would have the ability and have state authority and permission to add some other red lights along state highway intersections, and that has not yet happened. We are still working as well as the consortium that we belong with, but in the budget, because it's still so unknown and it's taken such an extremely long time, we simply have not grown that program right now. Last but not least, there are no stormwater fees in here, and property tax revenues. I have not included any increases in the real estate tax rate or the corporate personal property tax rate. So right now, just as a reminder, real estate is 1.002 for the majority of all real estate categories, with the exception of apartment building complexes, and those are taxed at a 1.032 per $100 of assessed value. One of the topics that we have discussed is the ability at the city level to impose a corporate personal property tax at a higher rate on utility companies. Utility companies are actually defined by the Maryland State Assessor's Office, and we have approximately 26 to 27 of those. Our corporate personal property rate by default across the board everywhere is set at 2.5 times our real estate rate. So right now that's $2.50 per $100 of assessed value. So again, I've not included any increases or any changes. The only thing that I have done is looked at trends, and in this initial blush included a 1% increase because we're in year 3 of our triennial assessment period. And the goal and the hope is that our appeals and our abatements, that we would see the majority of them all trickled through in the first and second year, so that by the third year we see a little bit of a growth. We'll not know for definite until we get our constant yield tax memo, which typically comes mid-February. So I'm really honestly hoping for at least 1.5% growth there. Fund balance reserve, just as I mentioned, I don't have anything included as of the number here, but again, I am saying right now, sitting at the table, it is my anticipation that we will be utilizing it in order to balance our budget. Salary enhancements, I've included some details here. I won't necessarily walk through all of them. We have 4 collective bargaining unions. All of those contracts are currently in place and go through fiscal year 22. So everything that was included as salary enhancements in the fiscal year 20 budget is based on all the information that's already been approved by this legislative body through fiscal year 22. I've put a little bit of information on the bottom just so that everybody knows what that is. And then as far as the non-union full-time employees go, last May, we agreed to unfreeze steps. So right now, for fiscal year '20, I have included that non-union full-time personnel will move one pay step on their anniversary date. So some people may move in July, some may not move until next June. Right now, minimum wage for the first time in the last couple of years is not set to increase this coming July. It's at $10.10 an hour. I do know that there is pending legislation and conversations about slowly increasing that from $11 up to $15, and I would just say, sitting here tonight, this table to this body and publicly, that doesn't just impact small businesses, it definitely would impact us. We have significant numbers in seasonal staff, the majority of which do not make that and are at $10.10 an hour. We have some regular part-time staff, permanent part-time staff, that is definitely nowhere near those numbers. And then we even have on the non-union full-time salary scale as well as on our 1540 entry-level contracts that are not near those dollars. So as the next couple weeks and months progress, if that is something that's done, even if it's a 4 or 5 year out, it's definitely something that we're going to have to plan for accordingly, because if we start moving seasonal staff to a level above where we put a full-time position coming in entry level, all that's going to do is add compression, and we're going to hear tremendously about that when we start redoing all of our contracts. So something, again, that we'll have to be cognizant of. As of right now in these numbers, there was no changing in staffing on a full-time scale. There's 452 funded full-time positions. 316 of those positions are in the general fund, right, Mr. Mayor? Okay, and that means 136 are in all the other funds, which include electric, water, wastewater. There are 2 full-time in golf. There's 1 full-time in parking. And I am mentioning that because when I come back March 31st, with all the other things and all the other initiatives that we wish to do within our parking fund, which basically is open and it's 365, 24/7, to put that all on one full-time person is a stretch. We need to add a second full-time position under there. I mean, we have 2 full-time positions under golf. It's not open year-round. And so definitely something that I'll be looking to include when I come back. Last but not least, I do want to take a minute just to mention that right now within our police department, we do have a higher vacancy rate. So they have 112 approved, funded, sworn positions, another 15 on the civilian side. They have 127 full-time positions. However, on the sworn side, they are short right now, are vacant 19 to 20. We do currently have staff that are enrolled in the academy. They are not included in those 19 to 20 vacancies, even though they're not necessarily sworn and on the street. So just thought I would mention that. On the benefits side, we started the budget process, and CBIZ told us we were looking at 5%. We worked with the healthcare committee. All of our benefits were put back out through the RFP process. We were able to achieve some savings. And so even though originally when I rolled these numbers out, I had a 3% increase, I'm going to be able to take that to 0 because we're going to be able to keep our premiums on the employer side flat to fiscal year 19 with a combination of those savings that we've received in rebidding all of our benefits, as well as our healthcare committee has committed to helping to find the additional savings through the plan and whatever change that may look like, which is a tremendous amount. Big dollars though on health insurance, so just so that we're aware, on the general fund side only, and again, on the general fund side only, active employees, our health insurance cost is at $3.2 million, our retirees, $1.4 million just in the general fund. Dental insurance, flat, no increase on our premiums there. Police and fire pension. So I've included 14% as the employer's share in this initial blush through, and I do not intend to reduce that percentage by the time I come back March 31st. We actually had set with the committee, we had asked our employees to go from a 7% to an 8%, which they willingly did for us this past July, and we guaranteed, and when we asked them to do that, we asked them to help us find ways to fund this plan because it's woefully underfunded. And we committed to our max 14%. We were not going to increase the employees' rate just to turn around and reduce what the city's putting in. We wished to continue to put in the 14% because realistically, we do have to find a way to get the funding percentage a little higher. State of Maryland, unlike our police and fire pension, the state of Maryland, we're mandated and the state sends us the information, not just for what the employees must contribute, but also what the employer must contribute, and it is increasing from 9% to 9.38%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's still over a 4% increase, and we have approximately $20 million in base salaries that's applied to, so that is included in our numbers as well. CIP projects, I mentioned that approximately $1.9 million in the initial request was going to be from general fund dollars. That's an area where Jennifer and I and a staff person have really been looking and working and trying to find ways, not necessarily to defer and cut, we were able to do that with some, but also look at other funding solutions, and as well as looking at fund balance reserve. But again, 1.9 million, and the majority of that, vehicles 704,000, public safety group, aside from vehicles, another 565,000, and all the remaining of that was pretty much in parks, some IT-related infrastructure and server upgrades, and miscellaneous other items. We do anticipate that we're going to need to issue bond, and we may have to do it twice, one in, excuse me, one before July 1, 2019, because we have several projects, one of which we're moving forward, several others that need to move forward as they remind me every week. So I'll be taking a look at that and coming back to start that process soon. One of the things that we did not impact or touch so far, and definitely not unless we're directed otherwise this evening, is there's been no change, no reduction in any core city services, no changes in recreation, public safety, public works, golf course. The amount that's included here does include and anticipate that we were changing our traditional Blues Fest event. So on the revenue side, it was a little bit more noticeable when you looked at one line under unallocated general expenses because the revenue decreases from one year to the other. Now it's about $70,000 that we used to get in sponsorship and gate admission from Blues Fest. But again, we reduced on the expenditure side by the same amount. So while it looks like we've reduced our revenue, we've really taken that into effect, net impact across the budget. Right now, fiscal year 20 stipend to the golf course was a little bit over $200,000. It was about $240,000. Typically, it's anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000. And then just big items. I thought I would mention the Maryland Theater did come in and do a presentation back in December. They mentioned that they wanted an additional $300,000 from the city. I do not currently have anything more for the Maryland Theater beyond our $9,000, which is our normal annual general fund agency contribution, because I did not get direction otherwise from this body. I will say, as a reminder, we did do an additional $200,000 as a one-time grant just this past July. The ice rink, there's been conversations as recently as this evening. There is nothing included in any of the numbers on an operating or CIP side to expand the second sheet of ice, even in the 5-year projections. Sportsplex, again, conversation that was held earlier this evening. We really have no monies on an operating or a capital side right now for any of that, as well as a minor league baseball stadium. And when I say minor league baseball stadium, no dollars other than what we normally have, which is the $35,000 in rent that we receive to put back in the infrastructure. And we have a little bit of money on the operating side, as we do every single year, for some maintenance things that we're responsible for. But other than that, we don't have any dollars included for major upgrades, renovation, or a new stadium build. cable franchise revenue, I think I did mention that I, right now, do not have any dollars in. I'm gonna really have to reassess that, but I am ultra conservative. So I hesitate to put $360,000 revenue in here to turn around and get in September or October and say, now we gotta take it all out. Where am I gonna find it? But again, I'll work with the departments and see where we stand. I mentioned and included one other bullet just because it's been conversations that we've had here and there, but the city does continue to contribute $400,000 on an annual basis to the 911 funding to the county, and that is still included in here in my money, in this $3.4 million deficit. There were two things that were a little bit different that we don't typically include on the way of contractual services or consulting. I thought I would bring it to our attention. One is stormwater management, and we did just recently, Rodney received approval, I think just a couple weeks ago, to move forward with phase 2. Some of that we will be doing in current fiscal year 19, and we had an additional $60-some thousand already included and budgeted. Phase 2, as a reminder, the entire amount was $127. So have included the additional monies in fiscal year 20 to conclude that, but it's looking like we're hoping half will be done in 19 and the other half in 20. A branding and marketing consultant. So we know that through the mayor and council goals, that a total rebranding is a priority across the city in the next several years and is a higher priority than some of the others, or a priority that we need to start addressing sooner than 3 years from now. So we've included some monies in the communications budget to allow them to start conversations sitting here at the table, and then if there's permission to do so, to go ahead and do an RFP and find an outside consultant to help do what that looks like, or come up with solutions on what that looks like. Last but not least, incentives. So again, as I mentioned, right now I have $1.2 million from the general fund to economic redevelopment. $175,000 is for ongoing normal incentives, PEP incentives, and it's the largest that takes over $100,000. There's also $1 million for Invest Hagerstown Grant Program, which consists of City Center Redevelopment Grant, Citywide Redevelopment Grant, Home Ownership Grants, and the Hagerstown Rental Property Rehab Grant. So at this point last year in May, I have an additional $800,000. And I know that these incentives, the goal is, Mr. Mayor, that we want $1 million each year to be able to give back out. So right now what I'm saying to this group is, I've got that $1 million in there, but realistically, I am not gonna say that when I sit back down March 31st, that it won't be somewhere between 800 and $1 million if I need that extra to help balance. Because we have 800,000 in additional revenue, definitely would do that in the grants, but I don't know if I can find enough other areas in the current deficit to continue to keep the whole $1 million. I did include a really quick synopsis and chart just of what those Invest Hagerstown grant program looked like and what it was for fiscal year 19. I don't want to give too many details because I know Jill's group and Danelle will be here next week, I think, to talk about, status a little bit more in detail and in depth of how that's going. The city center and the citywide, which we really anticipated as soon as we refound funding, they went very quickly, very quickly. And so even though we've obligated the dollars so far, we haven't actually spent any because none of the current projects have been finalized, but we've obligated and committed it. So if we were to close the fiscal year and these projects would not be finished out, then we would set aside fund balance reserve, take it out of unassigned so that we know we can't spend that on other things. I'm going to turn it over and let Jennifer just do a quick little blurb because we really want to cover and give a shout out to electric, water, and wastewater. We're doing it now because we anticipate April and May we won't be doing this. We'll be more focused on other areas.
Yeah, like Michelle said, just a quick little couple bullet points about the utility funds. I believe a utility group came to you and got an approval for 5 years for the water and wastewater rates. and also the electric contract for the purchased power is in place until FY '22 as well. So looking at the electric fund, and again, this is just preliminary numbers, we believe that most of these numbers will probably not change between now and March 31st. But as of June 30th, 2018, the electric fund had 15.9 million in net position. And the electric fund going forward expects the retained earnings for FY '19 in the amount of 112K, and it'll actually decrease so far in the FY '20 budget of 21K. Capital improvements for the electric fund, looks like they're gonna use their electric fund and contributions by others, and the total amount for their projects for FY '20 is estimated at $667,000. The water fund, as of June 30th, they had 86.4 million in net position. Their retained earnings will increase estimated FY '19 in the amount of 215K, and it looks like a slight decrease in FY '20 in the amount of 438K. Capital improvements in the water fund. They will be using water fund, bond financing, MDE loans, and anticipated grants for mostly doing the Edgemont Reservoir improvements. The CIP projects are gonna total for FY '20, $3.4 million. For the wastewater fund, as of June 30th, 2018, they had 49.7 million in net position. They expect to increase their retained earnings as of FY '19 in the amount of $446,000, and estimated so far for FY '20, 368K. And then the wastewater fund is going to use their fund, bond financing, and contributions by others, and they have an $8.6 million CIP projects they're estimating for FY '20, and that's for the Cinegrove facility upgrade. So that's just a quick snapshot of the utility funds, quick and easy.
So I know we threw a lot of information, a lot of numbers out. Again, my biggest message right now this evening is March 31st, the general fund will be balanced. I'm here to provide a snapshot only of initial requests, which was at 3.4 deficit. I understand, but we've already worked on that and we've got it down $1 million. What I would ask, if there is, I'm not gonna ask for many because I'm gonna be honest. I still have $2.3 to $2.4 million to go. But if there is one thing that the majority either is insistent has to be in or has to be out, tell me now.
I mean, for me, there's two things in your memo that are important. The first is the chart that you provided both on the revenue and expense side. I mean, they're guesses at this point. I mean, until you get the constant yield, until you get meetings with the departments for changes in CIP, priorities, and estimated additional revenues and expenses, they're a guesstimate. So, any report you send out to the public, and I look at the paper when I say this, and you say the city's facing a $3.4 million deficit is, I mean, that's just a number out of the air at the moment. So for me, the important part of that chart is, when I look at it, I try and prioritize it in terms of things that are hard and things that are soft cost associated. And when you look at the expense side, you look at the wage and benefit components of that. Those are hard costs. You've got contracts that you've agreed to, and so that 800, and I think it's 822,000, whatever, and then some of the others, they're fixed. They're not going to change much. But I look at that 1.9 million, I think in the capital side, the transfer, and so those are more flexible. Same thing on the revenue side, where you look at the you show the deficit on, it's not a deficit, you're basically transferring money in. That's a fluid number at the moment as well. And I think that's heavily going to depend on when you get the constant yield determination. If that's 2.5%, it's going to decrease that number on the revenue side in terms of the deficit you got to eat into to take it. So that's on that chart. The one important component of all of those numbers that I want to get back to that you said earlier is, our goal, obviously would be to have, as much money as we can into these investment programs. But I want to make sure, at least through the budget process, and this is just me speaking, I was pretty clear last year when we implemented that adjustment in the tax, that tax adjustment was an investment effort. And so while I certainly don't have any expectation that you get to $1 million or $1.5 million, I will say to you very clearly, I don't want a single dime of that being used for non-investment oriented purposes. In other words, I didn't vote for that adjustment in the tax rate so that we could balance the budget in 19 and 20 and 21 and so forth. I did that so that we'd have money, an identified sort of pot of money, whatever that number is, to set aside for those investment purposes. So if that new money's 875, then we got 875. And for me, that's the floor. I don't have a ceiling. If it's 925, then that's what it is. But you'll know what that is once you get the constant yield rate paper and apply it against that adjustment increase and say, here's what the difference is. So whatever that difference is, for me, I'm going to be looking at that budget and saying, did we invest all of that new money that we committed to when we adjusted the tax rate to those investment purposes that we identified, would then generate, an increase in investment. Because the goal of that was to grow the assessable tax base, and that's what it should be used for.
I think we all agree with that.
I agree with that.
We will be able to say yes on March 31st to that question.
Yes, I will, and that's what I
That
was
was a
saying.
statement with you,
It-
for the two of us,
It
yes.
would not go below 800,000. That is the additional dollar amount in revenue. And again, waiting until we get the constant yield. So I'm saying it would be between 800 and $1 million. And again, I'm not saying that we still won't leave aside another 150 for PEP, but I can't do, we were typically doing between 150 and 200,000 to economic redevelopment before. So I'm committed to doing, as you have stated, 800,000 plus or minus whatever we get in our constant yield. I would like to be able to give more, but if it ends up being that this is what it is and I need $200,000, do I give the $200,000 additional to incentives or somewhere else within the general fund? Again, knowing the floor is 800, I'm not going below it, then I don't, unless this group is giving me direction, I don't want to make the call on what service I'm taking away for the $200,000.
Well, for me, I think our goal between now and a budget adoption, I think we need to resolve our position on the utility tax rate. I think we need to resolve our position on the stormwater management fee structure. And I think we need to resolve the issue of frankly, the amount that we're contributing to the county for public safety that other communities aren't. That I think the county should fairly look at and say, you know what, you don't have to do that.
And just as a reminder, on the utility tax side, total our corporate personal property taxes is about 2.7 million. There's about 26 companies right now inside our corporate limits that the state has defined as a utility company, and 2 or 3 of them by far have 70% of the assessed value of all those utility companies. So, okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Be back in March. April.
Okay, Mr. Simpson.
Yes, just a few short ones, and once again, our appreciation to Michelle and Jennifer and their entire staff. There are thousands of hours of other department heads and assistants to put in to develop the budget, to get it through initial and to finalization. And they do work very well with Michelle and Jennifer both. There'll be some issues that we'll deal with on this, but we have committed to a 0% tax increase for our citizens, still retaining the initial investment that Councilmember Alshire spoke about. So thank you all for working with that, and we'll have it to you on March 31. For me, I appreciate the recent input regarding some policies and procedures that we can look at through the investment community and various levels of city government. We're open to all discussions. We want to create partnerships that make a vibrant, strong city, and that is what we will be working for in the near future. Thank you all again for your assistance in that. And on a good note, February 9th, 6 a.m. to 12 at the City Farmers Market, we will have our themed sweet things for Valentine's specials. So if you have an option, a chance to get up there, please do.
Shelley?
Somewhat of a shameless plug, I just want to congratulate Brooks House on their grand opening today. Huge accomplishment. To be able to open debt-free is pretty amazing, and it just shows community support, and that's from city taxpayers, county taxpayers, everyone. So it just goes to show that we can all work together and create something pretty amazing. So thank you for all of you who came out and supported. That's it.
Luke?
Nothing tonight, Mayor, thank you.
Austin?
Nothing tonight.
Kristen?
As I indicated to the director last week, I did take the kids down to the Discovery Station on Saturday, and it definitely is a different feel and a different vibe in there. So she is definitely doing wonderful things in that space, and you know, they all had a good time. It could definitely be you know, a bit more hands-on, but as soon as you go in, it definitely had a greater feel of sort of that kid oriented activity environment. And you know, I will tell you, as parents of 5 children, you know, looking to do things on a weekend, to get in a place and spend as long as you want for $30, you know, for the whole family is a ridiculously cheap deal. And so we definitely had a good time at a great cost.
Good for you, Kristen. Gosh, that makes me happy.
All right, I don't have anything either, except that I will echo Shelley's comments and congratulate Kevin and Dana Simmons and all the board of directors and all those who donated so much to Brooks House to allow it to open at that free facility. So congratulations once again, and we'll see you next Tuesday.